Let's just dive right in, because today we are unpacking a truly cinematic story of human resilience. We're looking at the life of Miles. Now, Miles was a fast food worker whose grandest dreams and biggest aspirations were just completely buried by the heavy, exhausting weight of simple survival mode. But listen, this isn't a story about staying stuck. It's about refusing to be invisible. It's an absolutely incredible blueprint of how one guy rebuilt his entire life, his mindset, and his future, literally entirely from behind the counter.
So, I gotta ask you, have you ever felt completely invisible? For Miles, this wasn't just some fleeting feeling you get every once in a while. It was his daily, painful routine. Just imagine this for a second. Every single evening, while families were sitting around laughing together and eating warm meals, Miles was standing right there behind a fast food counter, forcing himself to pretend to smile through absolute exhaustion. He's surrounded by loud kitchen noises, the crushing pressure of rush hour, and just constant nonstop stress. And the reality? Most customers never even remembered his name. Some were kind, sure, but others treated him like a totally replaceable machine designed only to serve up their orders quickly. And you know, after years of repeating this painful cycle day in and day out, he actually started to believe he truly was replaceable.
That brings us to part one, the invisible worker. To really understand how he broke out of this, we have to look at where he started. Miles grew up in a small apartment where constant financial stress was honestly just a normal fact of life. His mother worked incredibly long, draining retail shifts, and his older brother had dropped out of school early and was constantly struggling. Arguments about money filled their home almost weekly. And worse, Miles carried some really heavy childhood trauma. Back in school, he constantly felt inferior. One afternoon, a group of classmates publicly mocked his old uniform and everyone laughed at him. That deep humiliation taught him to avoid attention at all costs, and it quietly eroded his belief in himself. So his life basically became a tale of two completely different realities. By day, he was trapped in this depressing reality. One evening, one of those old classmates unexpectedly walked into the restaurant. When she saw Miles in his uniform, her expression shifted instantly. And the crazy part? It wasn't disrespect, it was pity. That pity crushed him, mostly because he already feared he was a failure. But what nobody understood was that at night, in the dark, he was secretly rebuilding his mind and his future. This brings us to part two, the awakening. The turning point happened late one night after closing. The restaurant was completely silent and Miles was totally alone, just wiping down tables. Emotionally, he was absolutely depleted. But then he noticed a successful businessman sitting quietly near the window, finishing his food. The man just watched Miles work in the silence for a bit, and then he said something totally unexpected. He looked at him and said, "You seem smarter than this place." Miles kind of awkwardly laughed it off, replying that life doesn't always go how people plan.
And then the businessman replied with this: "That's true, but people become dangerous when they stop growing." I want you to really let that sink in for a moment. Those words hit Miles like a lightning bolt. For years, he had spent all his energy just surviving, but almost zero energy actually becoming better. He suddenly realized the super painful truth. It wasn't his fast food job that was permanently destroying his future. It was his total lack of personal growth.
So the absolute crucial point here is that very night, Miles went home, opened up a notebook, and took exactly one singular pivotal action. He didn't sit down and write out some complex 10-year plan. He wrote exactly one sentence. "I refuse to stay mentally stuck." These are incredibly simple words, right? But emotionally, they are just massively powerful. Writing that single sentence was the catalyst for his entire transformation, because for the very first time in years, those words brought hope quietly creeping back into his life.
Part 3, the lonely transformation. Now, declaring change and actually living it out are two very, very different things. His transformation was painfully slow, and man, it was incredibly isolating. Think about it. When you start trying to improve yourself, the people around you who are comfortable just being average will often push back. His coworkers started mocking his new habits. They'd laugh and ask, "You really study after these shifts?" The journey to self-improvement is often a very lonely road.
This new conviction had to translate into daily, tangible action. Just imagine grinding through this grueling timeline every single day, waking up at 5 a.m. just to exercise, then at 8 a.m., grinding through an exhausting, super stressful shift on his feet. And then at 10 p.m., instead of just collapsing in front of a TV, he was online reading and studying communication. Miles realized a profound truth right here. Confidence is built through consistent action repeated daily. You literally cannot wait around to feel ready. You have to rely on discipline.
During this whole growth phase, there's this massive disconnect that happens. Externally, nothing changed immediately. He was still serving customers, still struggling financially, still physically exhausted at the end of the day. But internally he was undergoing a massive evolution. He had way better confidence, relentless discipline, and a completely renewed sense of self-respect. The proof actually came one evening while he was cleaning empty tables. He caught his reflection in the restaurant window. His posture had completely changed. His eyes were focused. For the first time in years, he actually respected the man looking back at him.
But you know how life is. Just when you think you have momentum, you enter part 4, the ultimate test. Suddenly, his mother lost her job. The financial pressure in their small apartment exploded instantly. Miles had to take on constant extra shifts. His sleep disappeared completely. Exhaustion entirely consumed him, both mentally and physically, and all those old, dark, hopeless thoughts started creeping right back in.
One night, emotionally broken after a brutal shift, he sat alone behind the restaurant. He was genuinely ready to just quit entirely, to throw in the towel. But then he remembered that businessman's words, and he realized a truly profound truth about surrender. Surrender is a permanent acceptance of failure in response to a temporary season of difficulty. He realized that difficult seasons, those are temporary, but surrender is permanent. So instead of quitting, he chose to keep rebuilding himself despite the immense pain and pressure.
That decision is exactly what led to Part 5, the breakthrough. Over the next 2 years, he was relentless. He didn't just show up and work his shifts. He used his free time to study leadership, sales, communication, and customer psychology. He literally turned himself into a student of human interaction in business, right there in the middle of a fast food environment.
And eventually, people started to notice. A restaurant manager observed that Miles handled stressful situations incredibly calmly. He communicated with high confidence. He solved complex problems quickly. These exact traits completely separated Miles from all his coworkers. He was no longer just a worker serving food. He was a disciplined professional operating at a totally higher level. And that discipline, it unlocked the door. A position for a training supervisor opened up. Now, his coworkers doubted him immediately, of course they did, but the manager had seen his mindset and completely trusted his discipline. Miles was terrified at first. Years of insecurity don't just vanish overnight, but he trusted the growth he had built in the dark, and he attacked this new promotion with rapid learning and incredibly hard work. Fast forward a few years later, and we arrive at Part 6, your blueprint for growth. Miles completely transformed his life. He achieved a way better income, unbreakable confidence, a peaceful mindset, and a deep sense of purpose. And you know what the most beautiful part of all this is? He realized that those difficult, painful years that he once absolutely hated were actually the exact tools that built the strongest version of himself. This all comes full circle in a deeply emotional moment. Years later, Miles was walking through that very same restaurant. The kitchen noises were identical,
The bright menu lights were exactly the same. But he was different. A nervous young employee, feeling just as trapped as Miles once did, looked at him and asked, "How did you escape this life?" Miles just smiled quietly and he replied, "I stopped serving only food and started building myself too." The entire room went completely silent because everyone listening knew, deep down, the absolute truth in those words. So, what's the takeaway for you and me watching this explainer right now? If you feel stuck, here is your concrete blueprint. Step 1. Stop identifying with your current circumstances. Your current situation does not define your future permanently. Step 2. Focus intensely on who you are becoming internally. Mindset changes way before your life actually does. And step 3. Rebuild through consistent, disciplined habits. One painful lesson, one difficult day at a time. The process is slow, sure, but consistent growth changes absolutely everything.
We pull incredible, cinematic, motivational stories exactly like this directly from Gravonix Stories. If this story resonated with you, the source material explicitly challenges you to take action right now. Subscribe to Gravonix Stories for more content like this, and go down to the comments right now and type, "I will prove myself." Make that commitment to the silent discipline that is going to transform your future. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on today. What will you build silently today so you never feel invisible again? Remember, your future self is waiting on the habits you start tonight. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.